Hello, everybody. This is Gary Fowler, and it is great to be here. One of those rare evening editions of GSD Presents Silicon Valley AI and Tech. And my name's Gary Fowler. I'm sure many of you know me, but let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been doing entrepreneurship for over 35 years. Love artificial intelligence and quantum computing. I am the CEO, co-founder of GSD Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in Silicon Valley. We believe that intellectual capacity is evenly spread around the world, but opportunities aren't. And that's why we're here today. And so with that, I'd like to introduce my guest, Michael Gale. I mean, he has a long CV, 8 pages. So he spent most of his adult life in Silicon Valley with additional stints in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. Moved back to Australia in late 2017 and focused on helping high potential Australian tech and agricultural companies from the world and help them go global and invest also in Australia. So with that, I'd like to introduce my guest, Michael Gale. Hi, Michael. How are you today?
Hey, Gary. I'm very good. Thank you for having me on the show. And I always look at when people say I have a long CV, it's so much better than saying I'm old. So I like that a lot.
I mean, it's like, the thing is, there's some of them that are long. Like I was looking at one prior to yours, that's 7 pages, but it had a lot of fluff and not a lot of stuff. And yours is just incredible, from First Penny Investments, Intercontinental VC. I mean, it's on and on. So tell me a little bit, Michael. So a couple things. You went to Prince Alfred College, but how did you start Harvard Bookshop? What did you wake up one day and say, I like to read and I want to get some books? Or, this, because this is like pre-Amazon. It's, incredible. How did you do that?
Well, it was nothing scientific like that at all. Most of my life is just serendipity and juxtaposition. I sit next to someone on a plane, I get into a conversation. And, so most of my life, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I had my first business in 1977, which, because I'd left school and I didn't have an income. I left home early. And so I kind of fell into one thing after another. And what happens, for most people is after you get successful or something happens, you sort of go back and you talk about how you saw this strategic opportunity in the market and this, but it was no such thing. So basically, I left school and I got a job at the Australian equivalent of Burger King, which is called Hungry Jack's, flipping hamburgers, because anyone could get that job. I became a store manager because, I had some organizational skills and I worked hard and I didn't have anything else to do. Didn't like that. And so basically I got into a retail business, literally delivering milk. And I did that I found out that you could buy these, like a licensed milk round, and you had to have a 1/3 deposit. So I told the people selling it that I had the third deposit. I borrowed that from the bank. I went to a truck dealer and I told them I had all the financing. I got a truck. I got into business. Did that for about 3 years. Very, very hard work, but good cash flow. But I was sick of doing that. I saw an ad in the paper for a secondhand bookshop in a sleepy country town, so I bought it, and then I turned it into a new bookstore. And what happened was I was in the country, and people would come in and say, "Look, I want this book," and they don't have it, and what do you, and I'd be like, "Well, what are you looking for?" And I had a particular audience because I was outside the city, and so my customers would come in sometimes, and they come to the bookstore. They were only going to the city once a quarter, so they would wait while you ordered in a book. And I had a couple of things I discovered. If I go into the supermarket and I want one brand of cereal and they have something else similar, I'll buy that. If I want Coke but it's not there, I'll buy Pepsi. But if I want a book on Mussolini as a teenager, I won't buy one on Hitler as a teenager or any other fascist. I won't even buy one on Mussolini as an adult. It's very, very specific books. So then I figured that what you need to be able to do is help people get the books that they want. So I became the first person in Australia to use the microfiche, because no computers, version of books in print. And I built a whole business in what they called indenting in those days, bringing books in, and I would custom order books for people. And I did a lot of work on sort of pre-computer programming about stock turn, how to manage stock in a bookstore, and all those sorts of things. And that got me really interested in how can you automate. I mean, what we were doing was like Amazon. You could come in, and I bought some time on the radio. I became a co-announcer of a breakfast show. I bought Australia's first ever 800 number, so people could call in from the show and order a book and so on. And we built a following up, and we had mobile bookstores and all sorts of things. And so we became known as the people who could get you any book, and that was our tagline. And that was literally how I got into the book business. Was I was delivering milk 6 days a week in the middle of the night, in the rain, cold, whatever, and I couldn't stand it any longer. And I was just reading through the businesses for sale. I saw this bookshop. I bought the bookshop, and then I expanded it into a much bigger thing. And that's literally how that happened.
Wow, that's amazing. And how many shops did you end up having with the bookstore? Were you spread out?
No. It was only we only had 2 stores and a mobile bookstore, but we had because it was servicing all country regions, so we had vans on the road going out, supplying books to schools, going and reading books. In Australia, there's this wonderful institution called the Country Women's Association, and people get together and come into the local town and all sit and do a lunch. And, in those days, it's probably still true today, women were about 70% of the buyers of books other than at, festive times. And so I used to go to the school in the morning, sell them books, lunchtime go and give a speech at the local Country Women's Association and sell books. And then after school, we'd have all the parents come in and buy books to support the library and for their kids. So we did that all over the southern part of Australia. It was a fun business. We got to be a very significant business very, very quickly by using a little bit of technology, but mostly focusing on what the customer wanted and understanding the complexity of stock turn. The first time I saw Amazon, I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. That is what you need, except that I didn't have $1 billion to do that.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so then you went into computer power. How did you make a transition from proprietor to business development? What was that all about?
Well, what actually happened was, because we were known for being able to get any book, and we were supplying all these country schools and supplying schools, as PCs started to come, a lot of the early PCs were people were buying a kit and assembling it and experimenting with it. And nearly always it was the math teacher in some small school. And then they wanted software to run on it. And they wanted educational software. And that was being published by book publishers. So Pittman, Longman, all these people, and it was coming on a cassette tape. And so because I was already importing specialized books and they knew me, a bunch of people suddenly all started saying, can you get us software? Can you get us these cassettes? And I'm there, sure. And I contacted the book publishers, and it was the same people we had credit with. So we brought the tapes in. And I discovered that it didn't matter how much software I brought in, it all sold. Whereas books, you have a lot of returns. And so books, you could average about 15% margin. Software, you could make 50%, and it always sold. So I thought, gee, I like software. So then I actually joined up with a couple of other guys, and we actually built a business where we built the first ever software in Australia that was based on the Australian curriculum. We seconded teachers from the education system. We got funding. We were backed by Control Data out of Minneapolis, Longman, Cheshire, a whole bunch of book publishers, and we created software for the Australian school system. Ironically, the Australian schools didn't really have computers, and we actually sold more of our software in Canada and America, even though we'd done it.
That's amazing. So was that Macro Media, or was that?
No. This was a company called Prologic, and Computer Power acquired us. And Computer Power at the time was a company that had been built by an Australian entrepreneur but had gone global, and Rupert Murdoch was the big backer. So it was in the News Corp stable. So they acquired us, and we became a public company. And we were all sort of pumped up on the stock, and it was fantastic. And what we did with them is so that the schools could use our software, we started selling computers, and we ended up selling computers actually to schools, to businesses, to retail. And because we had the backing of a public company and we had access to News Corp's balance sheet, a lot of PC dealers were growing very, very fast, but they got in financial trouble because of inventory problems. It was hard to get, all the inventory was coming out of America, then it started coming out of, Japan and Korea and Taiwan. People couldn't manage the inventory, and because we had capital, we just slowly bought them up, and we ended up having one of the, quite a big reseller chain. And in those days, none of the software companies, not even Microsoft, had an office anywhere in Asia. So we became a software distributor as well. '87 crash, the
Oh, I remember that. It was a Black Tuesday or something, right?
exactly in October, and the computer power stock was in trouble. Everybody was in trouble. Murdoch, that's the time when Murdoch, came close to losing his empire. So myself and my friends who'd sold the business we bought the business back for literally like one of those things where we bought it for $1 if we took over all the stock and the staff liabilities, and they could announce it to the stock exchange before close. So that's what we did. And then we spent another 2 or 3 years building that into a very big PC business in this part of the world. And then we sold that. Fujitsu bought that business, and then because they were wanting to get into the PC end for some big accounts, and we had this software distribution business. But one of the pieces of software we had was Authorware, and Authorware had come out of. It had been a spin out of Wise in Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the first computer-based training tools from Professor Michael Allen. I ended up being with another guy, the distributor of Authorware, because that didn't go with the PC dealership.
Mm-hmm.
We built that up in Asia. Authorware had raised venture capital, and they realized that we were a big part of their revenue. So they acquired us for stock. And all of a sudden, I was a shareholder and an officer of Authorware. I moved to the US and started running a lot of the international programs. We had a big.
Now, were you in Silicon Valley then, or you in the
Yes.
Midwest?
I moved to because at the same time as the VC came in, Authorware got moved to South of Market, literally Townsend Street by the Caltrain in San Francisco, which at that time was not the trendy South of Market. There was not. It was a pretty rough area, but we were there. And then, literally in the Loma Prieta earthquake, Macromind, which had been started by Mark Canner, and they'd merged with Paracom, which was Bill Woodward and some other guys. Their bankers, the Robertson Stevens, and there was a whole bunch of capital raising going, and Loma Prieta hit. A whole bunch of bad things happened. Some of the people working on the deal didn't survive. It was just a bad time. And so, as Authorware, we were able to merge into Macromind Paracom. We renamed it Macromedia. And then we built that out through to 93. We took it out on the NASDAQ in 93. And then many, many years later, I've even forgotten, I think 2006, Adobe bought it and took it private and, picked up all the Macromedia tools and, of course, Flash and all those things. So, and again, the sort of consistent thing about this is that, I got a milk round because it was the only business I could do when I had no education and no money and could do it on finance. I bought the bookshop because I was sick of doing that and because it was the business that was for sale. I turned that into something because it was in front of me. Customers asked for software, so we did that. The '87 crash gave us an opportunity. All these things. It's I'd like to say I had this whole vision and idea, but it was all completely opportunistic. I was a father pretty young in life. I was trying to pay the bills. I was always like, what's the next thing I can do in business? What's the opportunity in front of me? And and incredibly, I suddenly ended up being, part of this incredible NASDAQ story. And, we were one of the great floats of our time. And obviously, Macromedia punched above its weight. Flash ended up on over 1 billion devices. It was an amazing story.
Well, you were the CEO of Asia Pacific, right?
Correct. And I was doing that, and I was also looking after a lot of the sort of big strategic relationships with OEMs and the Apple relationship in particular, because I had previously in my reseller days been a very big customer of Apple's, so I had relationships there.
Well, that must have been interesting. Did you get a chance to meet Steve Jobs?
I did.
How was he?
Well, look, in the meetings I had with him, it's like, they just meetings, and most of the meetings that I had with him, we were talking about their need to move inventory, how much could we buy, how much could we prepay, and us saying, well, when can you ship it to us? And we want priority, and we don't want you shipping it to the bigger customer in America. To be honest, they were there was nothing. I don't have any good wow Steve Jobs stories.
No. Well, it's always interesting because every once in a while I hear somebody. I know several people that have worked for Apple, and you hear some interesting stories, like the elevator going up and he fires people on the way up. What do you do? This is my first day. What do you do? Well, I'm not sure yet. Get rid of her. I mean, it's
That's what he does.
stories,
There are a lot of stories about him, and Larry Ellison, of course, is the other one. That there are just amazing stories about him shooting
You
from the
can't
hip.
like Larry Ellison's like elusive. I mean, it's like you hear about him, it's like some character that's somewhere. It's like the Wizard of Oz or something.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
incredible, actually. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's interesting. So, okay, so you do that, then you had Toggle This where you're a director, Double Impact. So were you still in the Valley then? And
Yeah. So basically, what I did straight after Macromedia is I built CD-ROMs were hot then. So I built a CD-ROM publishing business. We actually licensed the Apple brand and published their CD-ROM collection, which I'm really proud of because it was groundbreaking at the time. And not so many people can license Apple's brand because it's one of the most valuable brands in the world. So that was a pretty cool gig. CD-ROMs, however, failed. So in the end, there was overinvestment. People were used to music CDs. They thought they should cost $20, but you needed to sell them for $100. The software wasn't good enough, and so on. But then I got into, building out what we termed a venture catalyst. In fact, I'm pretty sure the first time anyone ever used the term venture catalyst was a red herring article where they were talking about people like us. I think it was Randy Haken's Interactive. There's a few other companies in the Valley. So we were always trying to be the so-called smart money, by adding services, being able to do corp dev, biz dev, particularly a lot of helping people.
Michael, what years?
So that would have been, I think, between like 96 to 2000. So we rode the whole.
I know Tony Perkins, the guy that started the Red Herring. So I've known him for years. So Tony, listen, hi.
Yeah, so then he did Always On, and So
yeah. Oh, exactly. That's amazing. I can't believe you know him. I was in the 68 Willow Road building. So
okay.
And Tony had told me about that, and I stayed in there for a couple of years and started Eva.ai, one of the top AI HR tech companies. So yeah, I've known Tony for a few years.
Tony was great, and then he was doing that. That was like a club thing, and I'm trying to think. It was somewhere there. It wasn't like Atherton, but it was somewhere like that where you could go along and feed into the Sandhill Road thing. And
I think it was Sunrise Club or Sunset.
Yeah, something. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, he did that, and then I haven't seen him for a while. I'm not sure. I don't hear anything from him anymore either. By the way.
Yeah, no, I think I last spoke to him probably 2 or 3 years ago now. But yeah. So he was.
By the way, audience, Tony Perkins, they would call him the mayor of Silicon Valley. I mean, he wasn't a real mayor, but they really called him the mayor of Silicon Valley. Really nice guy. Would think out of the box. Very interesting person, and would be kind and bring people together too.
Yeah, no, he was wonderful. So we really built out this firm. We were, doing boutique investment banking, helping people raise money, and also we had a fund. We were investing, helping people exit, which is literally what I'm still doing today. And so that's really when I got into that. I stopped being an entrepreneur, I've been building my own firm, but I've mostly been focused on helping other entrepreneurs really since the mid '90s. And I was doing all of that in the US. Yeah, up to the .com crash when we had spectacularly just sold the business for like $90 million in stock, and we had a couple of big exits from some of our portfolio companies, and anyway, I went from thinking I'd just made a huge amount of money again to having no money at all. The way I like to describe it when I talk to people about it is I lost about $100 million in the .com crash of the 80 I had, meaning that I not only lost all my money, but I ended up owing a lot of money. It was a pretty tough time there.
Yeah, I remember. So during those times, I started a company called Broadient, and I was partnered with Broadvision with P-Hong Chen, if you remember. Then P-Hong mentored me. So if you're listening, P-Hong, hello. And then I went to Click Software. We did an IPO on NASDAQ. March, there was a meltdown. June, we did the IPO because the CEO at the time did an analysis that if we didn't do it, there was a strong chance we weren't going to be in business. So even with these dark times, it was worth doing it. We did it. And it was quite interesting. I got to tell you, I was there during those times. But that's Silicon Valley because there's waves, right? That's just the way it is. There's ebbs and flows, and you got to be, buckled down when you have the when the tide's not in, and you got to get ready to surf when the tide's up. It's just the way it is. That's Silicon Valley.
And what I've realized in my life is in general, you don't learn from success. It was like I was sort of a bit joking about in the beginning. Once people are successful, they go back and reinterpret. You hear these people giving speeches about how they got to where they are, and it was all like so clever and insightful, and they did all the right things. And it's never like that, right? But they don't even
never like that. Never like that.
But people learn from failure, because you have to reevaluate yourself. And when you fail in our industry, and you fail these big things, your staff, all the people you brought along are disappointed. Your family and friends who you took money from are disappointed. Some journalist, writes nasty articles about you. People, there's always somebody that worked for you that then hates you and spends years trolling you. There's always and it's hurtful. Without us entrepreneurs, you don't build anything. All the wealth that's been created today, nearly all of it's from entrepreneurs and entrepreneur-led companies. But it's rough and tumble. So you do learn when you fail. And I always like to say when I'm working with entrepreneurs that, really it's the failures that taught me everything. And if you believe that failure is when you learn, then I'm the most learned person in the world, because I've failed so many times, along the journey. But I'm glad I have.
I agree with you. It's another thing. I had lunch with Scott McNeely a few years ago.
Oh, yes.
I had Coastal Adventures on my show earlier this week. And anyhow, with McNeely, I sat down and I remember him saying one time, go to the areas you fear the most because you're going to learn the most. And he said, and most people don't do that. They go the other way. And over lunch, I had a discussion with him about that. He said, absolutely, because it's always going in that direction. Because if you fear it, you're going to learn the most, and it's a way that most likely other people are not going to be competing with you in those particular areas. So go to those areas.
I think that the last time I saw Scott was in Monterey in 1998. So I don't even know what he's doing now. Obviously, I knew him, but it was.
He's got a company called Weigh In, which is
Weigh In?
Weigh In, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the last time I talked to him. He was doing that, but he was. Typical Scott McNeely, actually. I was asking him about his Cadillac Delante that he had. I was just joking around, having a good time. He's real proud of his son who went to Stanford, was a really high-level golfer. So
yeah. I heard
talk
that.
about reminiscing. Those are the days. But, we're in Silicon Valley now. So, there's energy, although this COVID for the last couple of years in the beginning didn't really sit well with people. But the people that went online and started developing online presence and writing and getting visibility, it actually turned out to be a good thing, because there's really the democratization of opportunities. And so we're seeing a whole lot of that.
No, there's and the cycle just keeps changing. And obviously Silicon Valley is a very different place to when I first went there in the 90s. But the fundamental energy and, people talk about all the great companies that come out of Silicon Valley. And yes, there's been phenomenal invention, going back to the original semiconductors. But the greatest invention of Silicon Valley is the venture capital industry, the ability to convene trillions of dollars in the end of incredibly high risk capital, and having a mathematical formulaic an industry, and then a whole ecosystem formed around it where you actually can, and it's of course one of America's greatest gifts to the world is that ability to take massive risks on entrepreneurial things, on new things, and take a chance and create new IP, but do it in a way where society doesn't fall apart. It's sort of reminiscent of when the first stock exchanges started, when people were getting together to fund ships sailing to the East Indies because it was so risky, but if you brought back a cargo, it was so valuable. The fact that in Silicon Valley, really, that venture capital engine was created and the whole ecosystem. So as a society, we can collectively take these massive risks on really chancy things, and a few of them come through and dramatically change our lives. And that's Silicon Valley. That has not changed. It may look different. It may be different types of people, different types of companies, more virtual, more spread out. But fundamentally, that systematic, organized way of, the machine to take high risk and do it consistently for now 40 years, it's amazing. It truly is.
I agree with you. And, there's magic in the Valley. The other thing, we say that the Silicon Valley is really a port to the rest of the world. It's not really the U.S. It's a place where people come and go to access market.
Well, it's not in the U.S., is it? Is Silicon Valley in America?
Well, yeah, exactly. It's a whole different animal. And, and it's truly a port to the rest of the world. And so, I know we deal with companies from 38 countries today. And one of the things they say is when they're there, it's like magic, right? There's so much magic. Things happen. You can approach anybody and talk to them, and it's normal. I go to Starbucks in near Palo Alto, and in the mornings, many times Tim Cook's there, right? I wouldn't see Tim Cook in a normal situation, or Mark Zuckerberg at a Chinese restaurant that he goes to, or I mean, just a lot of people. It's just incredible, actually. You're there, and it's like, "Hi, how are you? You know, good to see you." You know.
But that's why it's hard to replicate. I've done work with because I've always focused on the cross-border thing, and I've always sort of, at one stage we had a sort of program called the Silicon Valley Lighthouse. It's about bringing people from outside in and bringing Silicon Valley out. And we've worked with a lot of different governments around the world who want to recreate Silicon Valley, and they focus on getting a building or having universities like Stanford and doing programs or having funds. But those are all, the trappings. The problem is you've got to get this ecosystem where everybody's involved. And the way I always talk about how when my kids were little, when my sons were young, and I was living in Noe Valley in San Francisco, and on the weekend I'd go to one of the local schools would have like a hall, and they'd have a bunch of toys out, ride-on toys for the kids. And you'd be standing there, or you'd go to Gymboree or something like this, and all the other parents were in the tech industry. So you'd be standing on the sidelines, like you do everywhere in the world, to watch Little League, football, whatever, but all the other parents would be doing something. And you met people, and I actually did a whole lot of business with people like that. I once sat on a bus coming back from a convention that the bus broke down, and the guy I sat next to, we went on to do business for years, and he ended up as the very, very senior at Microsoft, and we did a whole bunch of projects together. It's because sort of, everybody and the lawyers, the accountants, the advisors, the baristas, everybody's in on the gig, a bit like Hollywood. And Silicon Valley is a lot like Hollywood. There's all these people working together, and they work on this project and that project, but they're loyal to one another. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah, and that's really important, Michael. People don't realize that loyalty and trust are really incredibly important in the Valley. I mean, that's one of the ways that you get that money that you want to get, and you get the support that you need to be able to make your company successful. It doesn't just come. People say, well, you just come to the Valley. It's not like that.
The perfect 12 slides won't get you there. You can have no slides, but be known or endorsed by someone that's known. But I think that's all human endeavor everywhere in the world. But I think, I think one of the nice things about the VC industry over time is it has become a bit more accessible and formulaic. But there is some problem in that. There's a lot of work being done now to teach people entrepreneurship, teach them the perfect pitch. There's a lot of help for people, but it's a bit of a factory, and it's a bit like, there's no doubt if you go to Juilliard and all those sorts of things, you've got a much better chance in the entertainment industry. But if you look at, you go and look at any Netflix show or any movie, a third of the people, their parents were successful in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, exactly.
That tells you everything.
Exactly. No, I agree 100%. So tell me a little bit about, today, in terms of the kind of things that you're looking at, investments, entrepreneurial activities, what's First Penny, Intercontinental VC, your enhanced education investment, and you got a lot of things you're working on.
Yeah. Well,
a lot of boards.
The central organizing idea is we're building an entrepreneur's merchant bank, right? And what I mean by that is, an investment bank in the old tradition where we invest in companies. So, at the core of it, we're a boutique investment bank serving, companies that are raising money. We focus on entrepreneur-led, where the entrepreneur still owns a lot of the equity, and where they're disruptive. It used to, of course, be all just tech, but now, there's a lot of it's tech-enabled rather than fundamental tech. But mostly we're looking for good entrepreneurs. And what we do is, like any boutique investment bank, we go raise money for them. The difference in what we're doing is making sure that with our allied funds and our own balance sheet, we can get involved so that when we go to other investors who know us, because a lot of the people on the team have been successful entrepreneurs. One of my partners had 20 exits. Another one of my partners, has done investments for 30 years and managed an incredible IRR. So people know us. And so they believe in a company if we believe in it, but we're also backing it. So we find entrepreneurs to back, we help them, and we try very hard to be the smart money. And when I say that, well, what does being the smart money mean? It's not just about sitting on a board or having ideas. It's about having connections and about being able to actually get in and help people with corporate development. We do a lot of companies that are outside the US and they want to access the US, or they want to access the European market, or they're in China and they want to come here. And so we do a lot of sort of biz dev, corp dev. We do a lot of work with small entrepreneurial companies to get them a big partner with a bigger company that's got distribution or reach. So we're very, very hands-on, and we'll go right down, and we have alliances and cross equity with a number of sort of advisory firms. So we're trying to be the whole service thing. In terms of how we actually organise that, we have a fund called the Entrepreneurs Fund. All the LPs are successful entrepreneurs. It's a committed capital fund, so it's not like being in an angel group. So you have to, put committed capital in so that the fund can act. But then what that fund's doing is, it can go in quite early into a company, or it can sit alongside our investment banking business as we work to raise money for companies. And the key about it is that we can use the judgment of our entrepreneurs. We can pull people onto the board. We can do things. And it's sort of a home also for entrepreneurs who've had an exit. Exits are pretty valuable these days, and they don't want to just give their money to someone else to manage. But they get into one or two deals and they get swamped trying to help. So it's sort of a halfway house for that. Then we have our advisory division, which really tends to do sort of Series A to Series C. We have a capability to take people public, and that's, as I say, the classic investment banking. Is the way we describe that. We're not a bank in the legal sense. We're not a custodial, any of those things. We use the term bank to talk about what we do, not to say that we're a bank. But we do all that sort of advisory services. And then we're just launching a bigger fund called Decisive, and that's sort of focused on Series C and beyond. It's a much bigger fund. But threaded through all of this is really taking people on the journey. And what we're trying to do is actually solve three problems we see in the market. So one problem, if I'm an entrepreneur, I consume more financial services than any other business. I start out looking for seed and angel money. I got to go and see the venture industry. I got to find somebody to help me do M&A and fund it. I got to have, get into Silicon Valley Bank and get venture debt, or Pacific, there's all these things. Then I need someone to take an IPO or take me public. I'm always consuming financial services. But until I get to the big end, I'm always consuming it from very small advisory firms, and I spend all my time navigating. So I think that most entrepreneurs spend 50 to 60% of their time interacting with the financial services industry.
Sure.
And I think, rather than running their business. And I think half of that interaction is finding the people to interact with. Networking, and they finished with one advisor, now they need a different one, different stage. So what we want them to do with First Penny is we want them to think, we'll call First Penny. They'll know, they'll be able to help wherever you are, because there's no go-to bank, right? There are all sorts of financial products. These people do private-public partnerships. These people are good for IPOs. These people do structured. If you're an entrepreneur, there's no branded go-to place, and that's where we want our entrepreneurs merchant bank to be. Is the place you go to. And then we kind of see ourselves in that setting as like a switch where we can then direct people to the right places. And we're building actually a software platform, which is codenamed Navigator, and it's actually about being able to have a uniform way of displaying deals, but making it easy for the advisory industry. Remembering the advisory industry is a cottage industry. 2 to 10 principals in a firm. They all have a bunch of good investors they know, and they have a source of good companies, but they don't always match. It's a bit like real estate before multi-listing. Someone would have a listing here that someone else would have a buyer. So we're trying to make a platform, and we're trying to lower the friction between advisory firms so that it's easier to pass deals between them and share the fees and help, so that you can move much, much quicker. So we're solving the problem for an entrepreneur, that there's a one-stop shop and a place you can go, and a place that actually adds value. It's not just about the money and the financial services, it's strategy, growth. And we have a particular framework for how we think about financing and growing companies. We're solving the problem for all the little advisory firms like ours. So how do you cooperate and share deals and make the economics work, and not just scale to one big deal and long time between drinks. And the third problem we're solving is there's a lot of new entrants. Because there's been so much wealth created, in the startup community, in the entrepreneur-led tech companies, there's lots of people who it's not their prime business. Whether it's a PE fund, we particularly specialize in family offices. They might have most of their money in more traditional asset classes, but they want to be into these private startup companies, but they're not doing enough of it to build their own due diligence, their own team. They don't have the deal flow. But because they're family offices, typically the money was made in some sort of operating business somewhere.
Right.
So they have an empathy. They want to invest, but they don't know how to. So we're trying to build a platform, to solve the problem for them. So incredibly inefficient for entrepreneurs, incredibly inefficient for the boutique investment banks that serve them, and incredibly inefficient for non-VC investors. We're trying to use software and our own brand to solve all three of those, whilst at the same time building our own advisory business and running our own two funds. So that's it. And, we started it in Australia. We're very active in the Middle East. We're just in the process of launching in the UK. And we're going to slowly build the model out and go from there.
Yeah, that's super. And how big is your fund?
So the Entrepreneurs Fund we've just started with, so we haven't fully closed it. We're targeting 50 million. The other fund is a 750 million fund.
And is it fully deployed now, or are you still?
No, we haven't deployed any of it yet. We just started. We're just literally finishing the structure. We just finished raising the money, and we're literally getting regulatory approval right now. We haven't even launched. We'll be launching next year.
So startups, listen carefully. Michael's going to have money real soon. So give him a call. Michael, I want to say thank you. We're coming to the top of the hour. We're a little bit over, but I really appreciate it. It's fascinating. You got an incredible background, and you've done a lot, and we understand the ups and downs and ins and outs. That's the beauty of entrepreneurship.
Sure is.
So what are your closing thoughts, and how do people get a hold of you?
My biggest thought is, if you're an entrepreneur, often you spend a lot of time second guessing yourself and wondering, you worry about the failures, the mistakes or whatever. Don't worry about anything. You have to believe in your own story. You're the star of your own show. What we can do is we can help you navigate. We can help things. We care about entrepreneurs. We've got a lot of people on our team with a lot of entrepreneurial experience. We think we can pick a good entrepreneur and we can do a lot to help them. And yeah, people can call us, they can email us, they can go to our website. We're very, very open.
Can you give me your website just in case the people don't have it?
Yeah, sure. It's literally firstpennyinvestments.com.
All right, First Penny Investments, write it down, .com. So, Michael, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule again to be on my show today. It's fascinating, and we share some of the same history, the ups and downs and ins and outs. And you're right, staying positive and believing in yourself is critically important. Probably that's number one, actually, to be able to get through these endeavors. And look at the positive side of the experience. Some cultures say, oh, the glass is half full or half empty instead of half full. It's about being half full, and it's about being excited about what you're doing and enthralled by it. Some people ask me, why do you like it so much? I said, because it's not work. It's a hobby, and it's something that's really fun. You get addicted to it because it's interesting creating things all the time, and you're always creating. So remember, glass half full and not half empty. Believe in yourself, find the right kind of partners, build a great team because teamwork is important. Find connectors out there that can connect the dots, connect you with potential funding sources, connect you with potential partners. And if you do those kind of things, you're going to have dramatically increase the chance of your success. So do those things. Michael, it's been great having you on the show today. Thanks so much. What time is it, by the way, in Australia right now?
Oh, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, but it's Friday. So it's tomorrow for you, but it's Friday morning here. So it's very good. And thank you, Gary. Thank you very much for having me on the show. I enjoyed it greatly.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it too. And to my audience, thank you. Look forward to having you back again next week on Tuesday for another edition of GSD Presents Silicon Valley AI and Tech. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Have a safe weekend. Stay happy, stay healthy, and stay safe. And stay tuned because I'll see you again next week. Thank you.